So my name is Lynsy Smithson-Stanley. Up until about 4 weeks ago, I was the Director of Climate Communications and Strategy for the National Audubon Society. And are any of y'all bird lovers? Birders? Yeah! Yeah! Okay. Just if you don't know, the National Audubon Society is a 109-year-old bird conservation nonprofit. So we have more than 1 million members, 23 state offices, and we partner with 374 local chapters to keep birds safe at the population level all the way down to your backyard. So what we're going to walk through is the program that I was the director of. I only left because I want to go back to graduate school and study full-time how we can get people to act on climate change. And truth be told, I'm not a bird expert. So you guys can help me with the bird IDs. But I am a lover and an aficionado and a burgeoning expert on bird lovers and how do we use communication and best practices from social science to get people to care about climate change. So we're gonna do this really quickly, and the thing I want you to remember is that you don't have to be an expert in science, whether it's about birds or parts per million or atmospheric dynamics, to be a climate change advocate. All you have to want to do is love the things that you love and stand up for them. Come on guys, it's a baby bird. Oh, there you go. So in 2000, going way back, in the early 2000s, the chief scientist at Audubon posed a research question. He said, what will rising temperatures and the continued rising of temperatures do to North American bird populations? So those of you who are birders, he said, I want to build a field guide for the future. Now we know there's some uncertainty, right? We don't know how much more the planet is going to warm, but if we continue, we know that global temperatures and all of those impacts are going to continue to rise. We know too that everything is connected. Or as Gary, the chief scientist, explained to me, the non-birder, Lynsy, it's hard to be a bird. Each bird has a particular set of climatic variables that it's finely attuned to. Temperature, humidity, how many days of without rain can it handle? What's the highest temperature it can handle? Things like that, right? For every single species, those are different. When you change the global temperatures, you change all of that. You change where that climatic suitability occurs for every bird species. So what we did first is we looked at where are the birds now. So many of you, if you're a birder, you might have participated in the Christmas bird count. If you've done that, thank you. We used your citizen science observations. We combined that with the breeding birds survey to say, let's look at where 588 species are now. And then they did the really scientific process, which I call smushing. They smushed together all of those bioclimatic variables that every bird needs with the different emission scenarios, so how much it's gonna warm, and then they said, how is that gonna change in the future? So this isn't a local bird, but this is a bird where you can really see the difference. And so if you guys want later, we can do this again. But basically you see that the solid outline is where that bird calls home currently, its current climatic suitability for summer and winter. We see as we move forward in time, that blue, the dots, are gonna change. So here we have 2080. So you see this blue outline where it used to be able to thrive, it can't anymore. Instead, we see that its range has shifted north by northwest. So being the bird newbie, I said, okay, well, shifting it, that could be bad, but what's really the big deal? And Gary said, oh, Lynsy, birds can fly, but trees can't. And he was being glib, but he was saying, a bird's range can't just shift and we automatically assume that bird is gonna be okay, right? It might have new competitors. It might not have the shelter that it needs. The phenology of everything connected to that area, the timing of the seasons could all be different, which means to say, we can't assume that just because a bird's range moves northward, that bird will have everything that it needs. So here's the same thing looking at summer. We see that there is no summer range left for this bird in 2080. So here's it moving. So this is moving through time. how Audubon has projected the range of the chestnut-colored longspur to shrink. So that's one specific bird. Let's look across species. So we're 3 different things that can happen. The bird can have a bigger range, the range can shift, and the range can shrink. We coded those as climate stable, climate threatened, and climate endangered. Here's how we found when we analyzed 588 North American bird species. This is not good news if you love birds, folks. This compelled Gary, our chief scientist, to say that climate change is the #1 threat to North American birds. Not only is it a threat because of this changing and challenging climatic suitability, but it amplifies all the other threats, some of which Nathan just talked about. It amplifies the threat of habitat loss, habitat fragmentation. It means that they'll be doubly impacted when we look at things like exposure to pesticides. So this is really bad. So we're gonna go through the birds that we looked at in the beginning. I've seen grown men break down into tears, Minnesotans in particular, when you tell them that there won't be any loons on their lake houses. I've seen them cry. So what are we going to do about it? The National Audubon Society is grounded in science, but it's an advocacy organization. It's not enough just to tell you guys that things you love are going to be imperiled, right? We have to help you figure out what to do with it. So we tried to spread the message far and wide. My mother was very proud when I made it on the Stephen Colbert show, and he called us loon-lovin' loons. So part of it is that it is my job to go around and to tell people that things that they love and they see in their backyards are threatened by climate change. So this issue that feels really big, and sometimes, particularly when we talk about the Arctic and polar bears, can feel very far away, is actually very local and very present. It's a present day threat. So that's part of it, is we talk a lot. And I know that that sounds silly. Like my mama said, you're gonna talk them to death about climate change? And I said, oh yeah, we're gonna talk them into submission. But the social science research shows that talking to the people that you trust is one of the most effective ways to get them to change their mind in terms of how they see climate change as a threat. That even conservatives who care about birds will be emboldened and empowered to act on behalf of climate change because their peers and the people they trust at Audubon are telling them that it's a threat. So when you talk to the people you love about the birds you love, it matters, and we have the evidence to show that. So what are some things that you can do? Because I think that that's really important, because many of you, you're obviously aware of the environmental dangers. We know the political climate isn't necessarily all that healthy right now. So what are some things that you can do right now? And you have to remember that you can take action, or else we just all become paralyzed, and then we don't get anything done, right? So it sounds small, but we're gonna ask you to plant native plants. Native plants provide stopover shelter for those imperiled bird populations, and they make those populations more resilient. You can plant native plants in your backyard, or at the community level, you can start asking your homeowners association or our municipalities. And I have the links here that Aline will share with you. You can just put in your zip code, and we have a tool that will tell you the plants that are native to your area. We're starting to talk to Audubon members about seriously looking into rooftop solar. We know that it's not a possibility for everyone, but we really need to lower our dependence on fossil fuels and raise our dependence on clean energy. And one way to do that is through rooftop solar. And that's another one where the social science shows if you get one person in your neighborhood to go rooftop, it's 70 times more likely that you'll get at least 4 more people in the next year. It's a multiplier effect, right? Once one person goes solar, it's a domino effect. The other thing we're doing is, I don't own my home, nor do I have any access to the sky, I live on the first floor, is looking at community solar. So how can I, as a utility payee, how can I encourage that solar be an option for my energy choices in things like community solar? And then for those of you who do love birds and love counting them, we have a specific program where you can count birds to help us validate our climate models. So you saw those maps say, this is how Audubon science thinks that the bird is going to move. You're gonna help us validate and improve those. So those are just small ways, and then I think we'll talk more about the advocacy and how we're helping to help empower bird lovers to become advocates politically later. But yeah, I think that it's really resonant and it's really important that we remember that seemingly little things like the birds in your backyard can really move people. And I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I wasn't doing myself. This is my grandfather. This is 4 generations of Smithsons because my mama really wants grandbabies, so we count the dog. And this is our farm. And my grandfather doesn't really want to talk about climate change. He doesn't really understand what I'm doing in the big city, but he will talk about the birds that are stopping at his feeder. And he will talk about the fact that they're coming earlier and they're staying later than they used to. And that becomes a gateway for us to have a really civil and hopeful conversation. And he started to put out more feeders and put out more waters, and then it's helped us have a conversation about how we can use our farmland to help adapt to climate change. So I wanted you to know that that's my job, but I've also seen it work in my real life. Thank you.